Thank you so much. You don't have to apologize at all. Appreciate that. So I am seeing everyone but Mr. Manayan. Would you be able to check in with us?
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
Perfect.
Yes, I'm right here.
Thank you so much. So welcome back, everyone. It's 12:56. We'll be moving on to agenda item 7, license certificate reciprocity. We'll be talking about exploring reciprocity with the NVRA's CVR. Ms. Finner, would you like to give us the background on this item, please?
Sure. As we heard from Ms. Bucciarelli this morning, the governor's office has issued guidance on its diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Actually, that is my wrong page. I am so sorry. Let me start again. Reciprocity. So we have, as everybody here remembers, we've looked at reciprocity with Texas and with the National Court Reporters Association's RPR certificate. Those efforts were unsuccessful, but we're going to continue our efforts in exploring reciprocity today by proposing to evaluate the equivalent certificate, the CVR, which is issued by the National Verbatim Reporters Association, which we call NVRA. So as Chair Sunkist has already pointed out, NVRA tests both voice writers and steno writers. The first step in this process would be for the Office of Professional Examination Services to evaluate the CVR. As a reminder, the evaluation is comprehensive. It looks at the underlying occupational analysis, test development, and administration. The cost for an interagency agreement with OPES is approximately $24,000. And staff is recommending that we enter into this agreement so that we can further explore the reciprocity process. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I am going to, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this topic?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and it looks like we have a request from Priscilla Gwaltney. And Priscilla, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak in a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Hi, thank you again. So this is more of a question. Texas, why was that not successful? And then, yes, I do appreciate you looking into reciprocity with the CVR, and wish you luck, and hopefully it all works out. And that's all I have. I'd like to know why I didn't. I know I was I heard about all that process, and when it was happening, I just don't remember why it did not work with Texas.
Madam Chair, do you want me to address that right now, or do you want to see if there's additional public comment?
If you would like to address that comment, please do.
Okay, so the first thing we did with Texas is the same thing that we're proposing to do here, is have the Office of Professional Examination Services validate their test. And the Texas test did not have an occupational analysis as the basis, so we weren't able to really move past any additional investigation, if you will, or comparison.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
This is a moderator. Oh, I apologize. It does appear like we have another request for public comment. Public comment from Ruby. And Ruby, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Yeah, just a question. Why didn't it work with the NCRA?
Ms. Finner?
So we went through a similar process with the National Court Reporters Association. And while the RPR does have an occupational analysis, it didn't apply to the skills portion of the exam, which is the part that we're looking for reciprocity with.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
It looks like Ruby would like to comment again. Ruby, I will request to unmute your microphone.
Okay. This is my first time attending one of these meetings. What do you mean? Can you elaborate what that means? What was wrong with their skills portion that didn't justify reciprocity? Thank you.
It wasn't that the skills portion was defective. It was the underlying occupational analysis.
And I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting.
I was just going to say that their occupational analysis did not include the skills portion of their exam.
And Ruby, I would just say, if you have any further questions on that topic, I would encourage you to reach out to Ms. Fenner offline when we finish the meeting to get that cleared up if you have any other question.
All right, and this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And I would ask, do we have any board members that would like to speak to this topic? Ms. Hurt.
I just have a quick question. I know when we looked at reciprocity for Texas, et cetera, we had a task force. Are we thinking that we'll again have a task force on this or ad hoc group of the board? What were the thoughts?
I think this is, I'm not sure. I don't know if you were, no, I'm sorry.
I wasn't a part of the task force.
I was trying to I think it was Tony, Miss O'Neill, who was part of that task force. So we did, you're correct. We did the task force for Texas and to explore reciprocity with Texas and then also included NCRA testing. I think that I personally don't see a need to do a task force if the board's in agreement with pursuing this. I think that we've all spoken to the issue of looking for solutions for increasing the number of our licensees, and we have explored this. I think now occupational analysis is part of my vocabulary, and so I think that we've got the information we need to go out and get the information from OPES to bring back to the board and take a vote that way. If that's the point we get to.
Okay, I'll just quickly say that I support us taking this step because, as we've all heard, we need more court reporters in California, and so this is just another creative way to get more people. And I think the fact that we're having interagency agreement for OPS to evaluate how the standards are similar or not similar and to figure out that complete picture for us is going to be helpful in the next steps. So I'm supportive. Thanks.
Ms. Brewer.
Thank you. I'm wondering, do we know yet, or do we have to go through this process in order to find out if NVRA has an occupational analysis for their written skills exam? That was number one. And number two, jumping into the future and looking for solutions to get more reporters and voice writers out there who are licensed. Is there a way for us to work with these associations on they're getting an appropriate occupational analysis if they are amenable, so that because I mean NVRA, as Ms. Sunkey had said earlier, is going to be a fantastic partner if they work out, because they test both stenographers and voice writers. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Benner?
So we have also learned from the first 2 times around looking at other places. So I did start with NVRA to make sure they had an occupational analysis. So we don't start the process and then find out, we don't spin our wheels on a lot of time. They do have one. So that's what it's among what OPES will be evaluating. And as far as reaching out to the other associations, we gave feedback to the state of Texas on what the deficiency was. And we've reached out to NCRA on multiple occasions to let them know the deficiencies. And I believe OPES has contacted them directly and offered assistance with an occupational analysis, but we have not heard back from them.
Any other comments from the board? Is there a motion? Ms. Tugade.
I would move to instruct staff to enter into an interagency agreement with the Office of Professional Examination Services to evaluate the National Verbatim Reporters Association Certified Verbatim Reporter Certification for possible reciprocity with the skills portion of the California license exam.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Brewer, that was your second. Got it. Okay. So we have a motion by Ms. Tugade and a second by Ms. Brewer to, I won't restate the whole motion, but explore reciprocity and to enter into an interagency agreement with OPES to explore the NVRA examination. Is there any public comment?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. Great, and it looks like we have a request from Priscilla Boltney. And Priscilla, once again, you will be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Just another question. When you say reciprocity, you're talking just skills, not the written exams as well.
Well, we're at this point, the motion, the answer is yes and no. At this point, the motion is to enter an agreement with OPES to do the evaluation of the test, and then after that evaluation is done, the board will discuss it further, and then make a decision the extent of reciprocity and what that looks like and what it includes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And I will call on Ms. Bruning to please take the vote.
Thank you, Ms. Brewer.
Aye.
Ms. Hurt.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Manayan.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Tagade.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Sunkis.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Which brings us to agenda item 8. Ms. Venner, may we have an update on the strategic plan?
Now I will jump in on the strategic plan. As Ms. Bucciarelli had told us about, the governor's office has issued guidance for diversity, equity, and inclusion, a program that they've started. And that's allowed Solid, the training part of DCA, to incorporate those guidelines into its strategic planning facilitation. And they have begun scheduling strategic planning sessions for boards and bureaus in late summer and early fall. So if the board members would please provide staff with any blackout dates, or in the alternative, any preferred availability for July or August, staff will work with Solid to set a date for our strategic planning. This will be an in-person meeting in Sacramento. And if board members are available, I would recommend doing a day of strategic planning and then followed by a board meeting the next day. So we would contemplate an overnight stay of one night for the board members. We won't actually schedule that here. That's more in the way of an update and to put everybody on the alert that we'll be looking for some dates from you.
Thank you.
And then obviously on page 44, we do have the action plan, which sets out where we are on the old strategic plan. And if anybody has any questions on anything, I'm happy to answer them.
Do any board members have a comment on the strategic plan? Seeing no hands, moderator, would you please open up for public comment?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you, everyone. And we will move on to agenda item 9, future meetings. Per our usual custom, staff will poll board members offline about their availability for dates. Are there any public comments on this topic, future meetings?
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Are there any board members who wish to speak to the topic of future meetings? If I didn't already ask that before I asked for public comment. I've lost track. Seeing no hands, we'll move to agenda item 10, which is closed session. At this time, the board will now move into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126 subdivision A1 to conduct the annual evaluation of its executive officer. At the conclusion of the closed session, we'll resume the open session to discuss the Sunset Review report. And I anticipate we will be back certainly in under less than 10 minutes, likely under 5.
All right, this is a moderator. Looks like I have everyone from staff back. We should be good to go.
Okay. At this time, the board, I'm sorry. We have received, so we're going to move on to agenda item 11, Sunset Review. We have received the draft Sunset Review form from the legislature, which forms the backbone of our Sunset Review report. Additionally, questions specific to our board will be sent to us from the oversight committees at some point during the summer. In the meantime, we can begin the rest of the report. Ms. Fenner will draft the report based upon our discussion and decisions today and bring the draft report back at the next meeting. I propose we go through the draft form section by section. So if you would go to attachment 11, and I will call on Ms. Fenner to walk us through this.
Thank you, Chair Sunkis. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sunset Review process. This is a new experience for most of you, but definitely not for Ms. Hurt. This is not her first Sunset Review rodeo. The form that we're starting with today is the general form that goes out to all the boards and bureaus for Sunset that are up for Sunset Review. As we get into it, you'll see that much of it is statistical data, and that will come from staff. As Chair Sunkis mentioned, the legislature will be sending us questions that are specific to our board. And once we get that, then we can take those up at a future meeting, as we'll need to respond to those already. I would just like to, because we don't have an exact deadline yet, that normally comes with a questionnaire that's specific to our board. I would just like to propose that we have a December 1 target to finish our report. It may be January 1, but I'd rather be early than late with this one. So jumping into the form that we were provided, it starts on page 49. I want to go through each of the sections with you so that you're aware of where this hits which portions of staff. So section number 1, where we're describing the makeup and the functions of the board, 1A and 1B, then all of the information regarding who has attended which board meetings, when their term started, when their term expires, all of that will fall on Ms. Bruning's desk. So Paula will be filling in all of that information for us. Most of the questions, as far as changes to the board, that's changes in board members, changes to board staff, we'll be filling that in. We haven't, on question number 4, we haven't had major studies, and then we don't belong to national associations. Moving on to section 2. So the Department of Consumer Affairs collects a customer satisfaction surveys for us. We hold on to those and we'll summarize those and include that in the report. On section 3, the fiscal issues. So these are questions largely that will hit Ms. Conkle's desk. She acts as support for our budget. So a lot of this information will be coming from her. I want the board just to see how detailed the information is that is being requested from us. So it will take some staff time to get this together. and make sure that it's all accurate for you. I don't think there's anything specific on the questions. They're pretty general standard questions. If I'm moving too fast and anybody has questions, though, please interrupt me. Going to question 16, the staffing issues. I'll be reporting on that and preparing the information on the staffing. Section 4 includes our licensing program. So all things licensing will be hitting Ms. Kale's desk. And so she will help get the data together for all of the licensing. We now have more than one license type because we license individuals as well as firms. So we'll be breaking that down and pointing that out. It asks questions on, has anyone been denied and what are the reasons for denial, things like that. So I will work with Ms. Kale on the answers to all of those questions. There's some information, some questions asked about the information that is provided by the applicant. All of these questions are pretty black and white as far as how we process everything. So again, we'll be working on that. I'll be working on that with Ms. Kale. It goes from licensing into the examinations on page 55. Again, that also hits Ms. Kale's desk. So she'll be helping me compile all of the statistics on our examinations. We have school approvals. We haven't had any new schools apply, so we have no applications to report on there. And we do not require continuing education at this time. So those are short sections to fill out. Then moving on to page 57, section 5, we have our enforcement program, which lands on Ms. Conkle's desk. And you can see there are pages, several pages of data that the legislature is looking for on our complaint process. Not just the process, but our complaints themselves and the type of complaints, how long it's taken us to process them, how many were how many went forward to the Attorney General's office. That's an indication of how serious those types of complaints are. All of that information will be coming from Ms. Conkle. Page 61 has some specific questions that pertain to enforcement on the complaints and what goes to the Attorney General's office. They also have some questions on any information we have on unlicensed activity. On page 62 are the questions regarding our cite and fines. We'll have Ms. Conkle get us data on everything to do with that. They also look at our cost recovery and restitution. So sometimes when we issue discipline, if there's been consumer harm, we may ask them to refund money if they've overbilled, for instance. They may have something of that nature. So, and cost recovery is if it goes to the Attorney General's office and they are disciplined, sometimes the board decision is that they have to pay our attorney's fees. And so that goes into the cost recovery and restitution. So Ms. Conkle will be helping me get all of the figures together to report that. Section 6 starts with our public information policies. Excuse me. So most of it's pretty black and white as far as what the board does to keep the public informed. Do we webcast our meetings? Those are pretty straightforward. So I'll go ahead and include that information in the draft report. On section 7, we have online practice issues. I don't know if the board wants to have some input on that one. That's the first one, the first area, I guess, that if the board has input they would like me to include in the draft report, then just let me know. Seeing none, hearing none. Then section 8. So this is where we talk about workforce development and job creation. So I don't know if the board has ideas that they want me to include in this section. You can read over the questions that are specific. If it's historical work that we've done, I can gather that from our board minutes, from our action plan on our strategic plan. But this is mostly reporting what's happened, not where we plan to go with it. That's coming up.
Ms. Venner, is that where we would include pursuing reciprocity with Texas and NCRA?
Yes.
Okay.
I would ask the board if they have any input, if they see, especially, from the outside looking in from the public, if the board sees any barriers to licensure.
So in the same vein, Ms. Fenner, would this also be the place to kind of summarize, the numerous actions the board has taken, whether that's, related to SB 241, the firm registration and the licensure of voice writers, trying, obviously, again, it's still very new and we're still seeing what the impact is on the workforce, but would this be the place to kind of start to address those actions that have been taken already?
Yes, so we would definitely include all of the board's efforts on voice writing and where we are with the licensure, because I think that has a direct impact on the workforce development and job creation. I think the firm registration piece will include more with the licensing as a new license category, and then in enforcement as a piece of that.
And on question, it's not 10, what is it? It's 6, is it 60? Impact of licensing delays. Would that be delays getting someone their license? Is that the type of delay that's referring to, you think? That's not a decrease in number of licensees, correct?
Correct. That would be if there are, if, for instance, it's not the case in our board where we're not able to process the licenses in a timely manner, but that's a concern for some boards. And so that's where they would describe the impact of not being able to process those licenses. Were there any other notes for that section? If not, then turning to section 9, our current issues. Some of these.
I apologize. Miss Hurt has her hand raised.
Actually, I think Board Member Brewer had it up first, and then I can go after her.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Brewer?
Thank you. And I'm sorry, this is from a while ago. I'm sorry I didn't get this in. Related to section 7. Okay, when I went through the last Sunset Report, I just had a question on this wording. I guess I didn't follow this. It says firms outside of California are webcamming depositions within California utilizing court reporters, blah, blah, blah. This is of concern because there is no oversight of these out-of-state reporters by the Court Reporters Board. Is that related to the fact that they are working for firms who are out of state and therefore the firm licensing would take care of that concern?
Yes, so it's a direct reference to when we wrote the last Sunset Report, we did not have oversight of firms.
Okay, thank you so much, because that impacts trying to bring in CSRs from other states. So we're handled there. Thank you.
And then I just wanted to quickly add on to, I think one of the questions Ms. Spinner asked was about barriers to licensure. And I think we know that exams are difficult. They're not the easiest exams. The standards are definitely high, and I think in past Sunset reviews we noted that. But I also want to bring up institutional barriers in that vein of DEI and certain folks, largely people of color, having difficulties through institutional backgrounds to jump into licensure fields. I think that's pretty well noted. And I'm not saying that elegantly, but we can expand on that idea. But it has more to do with some folks who are limited to that process of licensure because of institutional inequities.
I think that's a very fair point, Ms. Hurt. I've been trying to turn over in my mind how we best want to approach it because our field is very diverse. I think that if you look at our licensee population, it's very diverse. However, I think that the English skill level that's necessary to succeed in court reporting is really high. And so I don't know how we can overcome that particular barrier, if it's even possible. But I think it is a point for us to talk about maybe more fully at a future meeting.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe there isn't a way to overcome it, but it definitely should be noted and discussed. And I appreciate if we add that. Thanks.
Ms. Tagade has her hand raised also.
To that point, and thank you, Ms. Hurt, for raising that really, really critical point. I know the governor's office has been doing great work in prioritizing DEI and inclusivity in particular across, and unifying that across the Department of Consumer Affairs' boards and professions. But I've raised this issue at a couple different board meetings, but we hear anecdotally that there's great diversity in the ranks of our licensees. I wonder if it would be helpful again, as we are moving into this kind of confluence of the new DEI processes with Solid, of our business modernization, and the ability to collect more data, and our sunset review process, and then also this recognition that we really need to look at our workforce development. That it makes sense to really get some hard data on who is in our profession. I know some other boards, like I've mentioned in the past, are starting to reevaluate how they collect that data and who is part of that data. Obviously, language proficiency is something that is somewhat unique to the court reporter profession. But as we've spoken in the past when we were talking about voice writers, will that change who is coming into the profession? Are there ways we can start to address particular groups? And so, again, just wanted to kind of suggest again that we start to look at that data more closely. So thank you.
Did you want to move on to the next section, or did you, I'm looking at number 63 and it kind of, I think we've got, that's kind of self-evident or readily available information.
Yeah, it's asking for data, so that's our opportunity to share the figures that we have. To Ms. Tugati's point, I'm definitely making notes. I know she's a fan of more data is better than less. And I agree. We are a little bit limited on what we can require from our licensees, but that doesn't mean we can't do some type of optional survey and see if we can gather some voluntary information and try and get enough response to have some kind of meaningful data that we can base our decisions on. If there aren't any other comments on that section, then moving to section 9, our current issues. So some of these are acronyms and things. For instance, on 65 CPIE, that's kind of been replaced by the Enlightened Enforcement Initiative that you heard Ms. Bucciarelli talk about this morning. So some of these terms aren't necessarily up to date, but staff will be able to put together a draft for you to review on, what's currently being done in each of these areas. Clearly, we're not part of BREEZE. We were never part of BREEZE on number 66, but we can certainly talk about what we've been doing with the the technology modernization. On section 10, so our actions and our responses to COVID, I think we've pretty much reported on those at all of the board meetings, but if any of the board members wants to bring forward anything they want us to highlight, just let me know. I'm taking notes.
I'm assuming this is where you would highlight the pivot to online testing, even though we were looking at this anyway, the board was looking at this anyway, but certainly COVID brought it to fruition.
It definitely kicked it into high gear. So yes, I would definitely include that in there. On question 69, there are some specific waivers that are listed there. There were waivers that were specific to court that, I would report on there, even though they aren't particularly listed here. There were some emergency orders that applied to court that we would want to include. So I would also report on our remote meetings in this section and what that's looked like from a budget standpoint, of course, but also participation of board members as well as the public. Moving on to section 11.
Ms. Fenner, I had a question. This is Laura Brewer. So I'm wondering, would this be an appropriate place to say anything about the fact that a lot of the strategic plan has been impacted, and therefore we're awaiting our next strat plan meeting? Or not really?
If the strategic plan itself hasn't come up in the body to this point, then I'll make a note to make sure and include it here. There may be a section that I kind of went over quickly, but I think that's a wonderful point to include. So if it's not here, I'll make sure it's in the report.
Thank you.
Along that line, I would say we could add, I don't know if it would go under COVID or current issues, but the big move, or I shouldn't say big move, the move to remote proceedings, that has been impacted directly by COVID. I don't know where that, like I said, I'm not sure if that's a current issue or if that's under, that's kind of, the industry has pivoted to that. So I don't know where, but I would imagine that should be mentioned somewhere.
Well, I would say that the deposition industry definitely moved in response to COVID. They were moved to the remote platform because of COVID. I think that some of the courts, what they decided to do when they came back would fall under that. As far as what happens proactively in the future, it almost seems like a new issue on if those responses have a place, like if we see a value to what we learned during that time, is it an issue for the future? So I would say, while the remote platform might have been a response to COVID, our new issue will be how is that going to be implemented so that the court reporter can do his or her job, and yet the litigants and everyone that's involved in the proceeding will also have a benefit to the remote platform. We might split it. Because I think, as we talked about today, that remote reporting has a lot of issues that it brings with it. And so we want to go on record with the Court Reporter Board with their view of what the issues may be. Did anyone else? I think I see Laura.
Yes, and I'd like us, when we're talking about it, what the issues would be related to the implementation of remote, I think this would be a really good place to include technical requirements and audio, because that's huge. And that frankly affects the availability of reporters to cover court work. Nobody wants to listen to audio you can't hear and make out.
And just a question with that on that point. A lot of it is not just the equipment, but also the bandwidth that people have to connect. So I'm not sure how we can go about addressing that, but I think bandwidth is really important, because with poor bandwidth, it doesn't matter how good your equipment is, you're going to lose connection, and then it could compromise the document, the actual reporting.
That's a very valid point, Mr. Manayan. We realized that pretty early on when we first moved to the skills portion online. So the video that they're required to download is 15 minutes long. So at first we thought, if you connect and can see it, you're good. But what's happening with the bandwidth is it would buffer every minute or every couple of seconds or what have you. And so the reporter or the candidate isn't able to report stop and start, stop and start, stop and start. That's not a good way for them to test. It's very distracting for the candidate. So that was an important issue that we learned very early on. And in helping the candidates troubleshoot, because then we would find out, yes, the candidate dedicated this time to take the test, but at the same time, their children were being not homeschooled, but their school platforms were remote as well. So the children were using bandwidth for their school testing. Perhaps the spouse was working from home as well. It was a lot for that particular household's internet to be able to handle all at one time. So it's a huge point.
Ms. Brewer?
I just wanted to add that that might be a good place to tie in the DEI issues, if it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I think everybody got the email with the link to the past Sunset Review. And maybe I'll give everybody a minute to bring that up, including myself. So if we're going to look at response to prior issues.
And Ms. Hurt has her hand up as well.
Sorry, I think I was jumping the gun a little bit. I was not thinking about prior issues, but some of the new issues, I could put some on the table that we should consider. One is, AI and how court reporters work alongside this evolving technology. I think is going to be a future issue for the board to consider and understand. Also, our long-term fiscal solvency. Actually, I think that's been ongoing, but as renewals change, not necessarily increasing at the rate that we need. What's the fix? We've talked about CART, so real-time captioning standards is still on the table. And then again, I guess someone spoke about it earlier, remote reporting and its impact on the industry. So.
I personally don't have any preference what order we do this in. If we want to take on the new issues now, we can talk more about the AI and just define that as an issue. What's the board's pleasure?
I think the AI is an incredibly important issue. I've actually just been reading up about the use of AI with note-taking and transcribing. So that's a great point. So I think whether it's now or later, but that's something that we should definitely monitor and try to look into.
Why don't we jump into it? We have it before us. So,
and Ms. Tagati has her hand up as well.
Oh, just seconding Mr. Manayan's point about wanting to address AI as an area of concern.
Thank you. Ms. Finner?
So AI as it relates to court reporting comes in a couple of different areas. So there's one area where it's added into the traditional role, if you will, of the court reporter. So clearly, court reporting software is going to improve and take advantage of every technological change that's out there. I mean, that's just what technology does. If there's a change that they think will make somebody's job easier, faster, better, they're going to incorporate that into their software. So we do know that there's at least one software program, I'm sure more, that incorporates the use of AI into their court reporting software. So you can, it's a feature that you can turn on or turn off, and you can have it help you a lot or help you a little. But the AI will suggest a word to you. So for instance, something happens and you're not sure you heard it, or it's an unfamiliar term or what have you, the AI, if that function is turned on, will suggest what it thinks it heard. So that's how it would be used with the existing court reporting software. And it goes all the way to the gamut that the president of AAERT was talking about this morning, Ms. Harris. So you could have AI trying to do the entire transcript. Clearly, they support that with a human person so that there's someone there to guard that record, know if the recording is happening, ensure people are not talking on top of one another, what have you. So it's a broad issue.
Ms. Brewer.
So I just wanted to speak a little bit about the AI issue. You know, I always like to say, look at things short term and long term, like in 50 years or 40 years. Clearly, this job is going to be different in the long term. In the short term, I think it's a little sticky the way it is because, well, for a lot of reasons, but in this interim period where AI is gaining general public usage, people are used to it. Everybody dictates into their phone, and of course, we all get very frustrated and send along the correct word after we see the wrong things that were sent. But the AI is already causing a perception problem for us that I think is going to be an issue, and hopefully we can address this in the long term as AI takes over a bigger part of this job eventually. But the perception short term is that people don't want to enter the field. I mean, this is a significant barrier to our getting people. The perception that AI is here and ready and the jobs are going to be antiquated pretty soon. And then there's also the perception of people, not just the people who don't want to enter into the field, but people, I had an attorney the other day say, why can't I just plop my computer down and put record on? And, it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. And until you've done this job, you don't even realize. And so those of us who are reporters know that the reporter is still the most efficient way to do this, but AI, it's coming, it's here in a way, it's coming in some ways with a court reporter whose job looks a little different from ours, a lot different from ours now. It will probably be here. It'll be it at some point. So, but I think in the interim, we have this perception problem, and I don't know how we address it, but I think if we don't address it, that's going to continue to be one of the big barriers to getting people into this field. And it's not ready for prime time. We can't just run our litigation transcription needs on AI.
I think that Ms. Brewer's point is a valid one. When I hear people say, it's just AI, we don't need anything else. Anyone that's met my husband can appreciate he's from Scotland and his accent is really thick. And it takes him about 12 tries just to get to a particular channel on the television using the voice one. We live in such a diverse state and the accents come from all over the world. I think that AI has a long way to go before it has a court application that's going to be useful. If it is mainstream America, if you will, if it is everyone that's well educated, can speak slowly, speak clearly, then yes, you probably will get a good translation. But that's not the bulk of the litigants that are appearing in our courtrooms. And so I think there are definitely limitations in this particular setting. Ms. Sunkist can probably speak to more of what we see in court than I can.
Sorry. I would say all of the above. I mean, as far as accents, as far as interpreters, as far as participants, and the application of, I hate to even go there. Because this issue, I will say that this issue has crept in with the use post-COVID, with the use of the online platforms, because as people are aware, the platforms have an ability to provide captioning. That's one issue. Another issue is with the online remote proceedings. And I don't know a lot about this, but there's the ability for someone to log in and to provide a feed from that, a transcription from that. I see Ms. Brewer nodding her head. I don't know enough about it to speak to it. Ms. Brewer, if you have want to share.
Yes, so almost everything that I do work-wise is on Zoom or some of these other platforms where I'm providing a real-time captioning feed. And these platforms, many of them, including Zoom, do have auto captions. And with the auto captions, it's plain to see the things that we are talking about when it's clear and slow and people aren't talking at the same time, or slow, not fast. The auto captions, depending on the vendor, are really quite good. And the vendors, it's important to know, and this we get into the perception issue again, the vendors give preference to their software, their capabilities, their functions. So they have a vested interest in making the third-party captioning vendors not look as good as their own solution, automated solution. So, they can do things like speed it up, chunk up the lines, add automatic inappropriate punctuation at the end of a pause in the middle of a sentence to the real-time captions that are coming in. But all of this contributes to this perception issue. And once again, for those of us who are court reporters, licensees, we know that if you go to transcribe audio, for one thing, it's much less pleasant, and it's not easy. It takes a lot of time. All you have to do is have a layperson. Anytime somebody tells me, gee, we can just use AI, I'll tell them, just try to transcribe 3 minutes of a live spoken conversation and come back to me and tell me how you're going to use AI or recording. So I'm sorry, I got off topic, but that's the issue about the remote platforms.
Ms. Benner, I don't know how you report back on this Sunset Review on the issue of remote in courts. after having been on the task force last summer with the Judicial Council and the other stakeholders, you know, other than the fact that this is wide open, and I would say the industry is trying to figure out how they can do this and accommodate the different stakeholders. And when I say do this, I'm talking about remote proceedings. There's not just one size fits all. Obviously, there's a lot of different. Everybody's got their own issues, and there's no magic way of being able to do remote proceedings in court, for sure. Like you reported earlier, some reporters have had very good experience being able to report remotely, and all the proceedings have been done remotely. And I did not have that experience in my court, which was started doing remote proceedings, within less than a month after we shut down for COVID, and things did improve somewhat over the course of 3 years before I left the court, but certainly it wasn't fail-safe. So
perhaps our job is to point out to the legislature exactly what you said, Ms. Sundkes. One size does not fit all. And so if we can find places where we're successful and identify common denominators, whether it's Mr. Manayan's point of, do you have the bandwidth to do this? Do you have the equipment to do this? If that's the key to being successful, maybe we can help lay out some of those factors for the legislature to consider in the future.
Thank you. Appropriately so.
Are there other new issues beyond the AI function that you want me to include?
I thought Ms. Hertz's suggestion about long-term fiscal solvency was pretty pertinent.
I've got that as a note. We can flesh that out, yes. We don't have a lot of data yet we can tell you how many firms we have to date. We're still capturing them. Since that just started up in July, we haven't even been through a whole year yet. But we should have our arms largely around the bulk of the firms. So that definitely has had an impact on our bottom line with that revenue part. So we should be approaching a point where we have strong enough data to be able to predict where that's going to go. I think the voice writer, as far as revenue and additions, I think that's a little bit too new to bring forward any trends. I don't think one is a trend. We just started it.
I would say that, speaking of trends that we've seen, there's definitely been a trend of electronic digital recording in the field, both certainly in the deposition field in California. We hear about it. And in fairness, it's a trend in the industry. And so our reminding us all that our task is consumer protection. That's something that we need to discuss. It's a big topic. There's a lot there, and I don't know how much we want to get into that today, but it's definitely something that we do need to explore. what that looks like. What's happening. I mean, it's our duty to report back. I believe, if I understand this correct, I understand our duty correctly when it comes to this sunset review. We must discuss it.
Right. So it's definitely a part of the industry. It's out there. Probably whether the board wants to go completely into it today, or if we want to put it into the draft report as a placeholder and flesh it out at the next meeting, that's your pleasure completely. But it's being used. Questions we should look at is there a place for it to be used appropriately? Are there adequate standards in place?
I think that's a wise suggestion, so I'm with that.
Right, and we have a bill in our packet, a new bill, discussing it, so it's definitely timely. Although, in fairness, there's always been that actually, I take that back. We've always had those bills before us, but clearly it's being used in the industry, and it's expanded certainly since the last sunset review was done. I don't personally, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, from the board's point of view, if we recognize it as something that won't be going away, then our concern is, what does that mean for the consumer? Are the AAERT standards enough, and what are their enforcement abilities? So if there is a problem with somebody that's using it or practicing and not up to speed, what do they do with that complaint?
And if not AAERT, well, how do we ensure that the consumers in California are protected if this is something that we are should be responsible for? I'm not suggesting we should. I'm broaching the topic. Uncomfortable topic, obviously, but it's real and something we need to consider certainly in the parameters of the sunset review.
So I feel like we've stalled out on this one a little bit. I'm bringing up the sunset review report from last time.
Right, I have it.
And I think, let me see if I can get the right spot in the report. So in the last report, the new issues is section 11, and it starts on page 46 of 48 of the report. It's page 52 if you're looking at the PDF numbers.
Okay.
So these were issues that the board identified as new since the sunset review before that. So these would be part of what we identified last time. So issue number 1 was the issue of the foreign corporations not following the court reporting statutes. And so that issue we can address easily with the firm registration law that was passed and how successful that's been. If we see any limitations to that or any ways to refine that, this would be a good place to bring it out. So I'll be working with enforcement staff on that to see if we feel like there are any areas that we need to add to it, or, you know, the complaints that we've received have been minimal. And so I don't see like a big trend as far as everybody's getting X, Y, or Z wrong. It seems like it's the same as it is with licensees, where if they do something wrong, we let them know, hey, this is the law. And they're like, oh, I won't do that again. And so there's a lot of education going on, which I think is important. But if anybody has ideas or have heard anything from their constituents or what have you, this would be the place for feedback on the firm registration implementation. The second issue that the board identified as a new issue was the low pass rate for just the skills portion. They were targeting the skills here. So in response to how the board has, how we responded to that particular issue.
Is that a question?
Well, I kind of interrupted myself. This one's difficult for me because I don't see us responsible for the pass rate, if you will. The legislature tasked us with developing an entry-level skills test. And so we've put a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of people into making sure our test is as fair as it can be, that one test to another, they're as regular as they can be. Everything's counted out precisely from the syllable to how quickly they read it. I think that's our responsibility. And maybe I just have blinkers on. Maybe this is a bigger picture thing that, the board can help me out with. But I always have a hard time responding to this because it's like my job is to make the test fair and administer it fairly. It's not, and then I'm not responsible anymore. You either pass it or you don't. So I'll just throw that out there for discussion.
I see Ms. Brewer's hand raised.
Yes, on this issue, I'm wondering if it would be appropriate. We haven't really talked about this, but if it would be appropriate to consider changing our skills test to be more like an RPR format, because okay, so low pass rate, low pass rate, yes, but I would imagine other reporters or RPRs, CSRs in other locations are having more success with our test. But the biggest problem is obviously with the repeat test takers, but with the people who are not licensed anywhere yet, that this is their first licensing exam. And part of our problem in getting reciprocity is that our test is different from other tests. That's not to say it's better. I think in the terms of our written knowledge test, I think it's better. I've been involved in the construction, item writing, every aspect of our national tests, and I've been on some of the workshops over the years for our CSR. And I think our written knowledge tests are better. They're a better test of knowledge, and especially specific to California. But the skills, I'm not sure that it's a better test. It's just a different test. And if having a different test is a barrier to getting more licensees, I think we should consider if it would be worthwhile to change it.
That may be a fair point, because if everyone else in the country is testing to a different format, it stands to reason they're training to a different format. We're all learning the same skill. Everyone's teaching the same skill, but if you're being tested on it in a different format, just that familiarity could be the barrier that you spoke of.
Agreed. I completely agree. But I see Ms. Hurd has her hand raised.
I actually have kind of a slightly different take, or maybe it's just worth reporting that I know during my time we've lost different schools, court reporting schools, which maybe makes it less able for us to be expansive in the folks that we bring into the court reporting field, just because they're looking at the landscape and saying, well, there's not that many schools. Is this really worthy of all my time? And I'm wondering if there's some kind of interagency notice that we could have with like the California Department of Education to help in trying to spur more schools in this space. And by noting this as an issue, and citing that there is a need for kind of interagency support, that could be an aspect we highlight under this current issue.
I will say that I am wholeheartedly in support of changing the format of our exam. And I would like to see us take steps to do that. I think if for nothing else, well, the idea is there are two benefits to doing that in my my thought process. One is everyone else, I don't know anywhere else that their test format is a 4-voice test. Everywhere else is 180, 3 5-minute takes, 180, 200, 225 to test for entry-level skill. That's what we're testing for, entry-level skill. And that's how tests are given in school. I know the qualifiers are in California are different to allow those people to sit for a test, but that's how we're raised. That's what we do the whole time we're in school, and that's how the national associations they're both based on that type of format. So if for nothing else, when a test taker sits down and that's what they're used to and that's what they get, perhaps they'll be more comfortable with it, and that will help with the pass rate. Also, the problems we run into, and Ms. Fenner mentioned it earlier about the buffering. We've got this big, huge file on test taking. So we've heard so many complaints about the online testing, and I understand that a large part of that is with the buffering of this big, huge file. Well, if you've got smaller chunks, the 3 5-minute takes, perhaps that will help. I would expect that's going to help with that problem as well. So, so I'm in support of that. I do think that would help with our pass rate, increasing the pass rate for the CSR. Ms. Brewer.
I just wanted to add something for our non-licensee board members. You might be wondering why is the standard 3 takes at 3 different speeds? And it's because each is a different type of matter. You've got literary matter, jury charge, and testimony.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to our new issues from the last thing, which would be our last sunset review. Issue number 3 was the shortage or perceived shortage of court reporters. Mm-hmm. So the board has a lot to talk about there as far as, how we've responded to that issue. We do have the voice writing. We do have all of our efforts on reciprocity. We'll have data to show, you know, the number of court reporters that are going in, things like that. So I'm not sure if there's something new that the board wants to add to that particular area.
I think we should add the fact that we're seeing an influx of students in court. I apologize, Ms. Brewer. I just saw your hand after I started talking. So you'll be next, okay? We've had an influx of court reporting students in our schools since the legislation was signed for to allow us to license voice writers. I know personally it's not one of the California recognized schools, but Poway Adult School near me, they've actually pivoted to a all voice program, and there has been an overwhelming response to the informational meetings that they have given. And so so I would say there's been an increase, certainly just for that school alone that I'm aware of. And other schools have added voice to their, at least 2 of them, in addition to West Valley, who had already added a voice program. Two, I can't think of the names, and Ms. Fenner probably knows the names. They were at, I believe, our last meeting talking about, or maybe it was the meeting for our curriculum, voice writing curriculum, but they're also adding voice programs. And so I think we need to discuss that in this section to address the voice writer, or student shortage. And that's, I think, a good indication. Hopefully that's a good indication of where we're going with our number of licensees. And I apologize, I went on longer than I anticipated. Ms. Brewer?
So, you know, another issue with this is, and I don't know how this kind of coordination could be done, but coordinating with the courts for a more efficient use of court reporters. I mean, a lot of this shortage, I mean, there's a shortage, without a doubt. You know, we can get rid of the word perceived, but when you have a shortage, it's that more incumbent on the system to be efficient with a scarce resource. So I don't know what we can do to coordinate to be more efficient. That was one thing. And then also going back to the whole testing issue, you know, we went to giving, and this was in the last Sunset Review, yes, decided to offer 2 tests. Well, we've been offering 2 tests.
3.
So 3. So we've been offering 3 tests. So that's also something that's been done to help with the low pass rate. But yeah, I'd like to see us, boy, it'd be great if we could do outreach somehow to try to get more coordination. That when the courts got rid of their civil court reporters, boy, that was the death knell.
And the outreach shouldn't just be limited to courts. Outreach should be to the our licensees, number one, and to also industries that use court reporting. The ones who are in the courts, right? Maybe they can think outside the box, right? We're in the system, and maybe they can think outside the box and provide us some feedback of how we can make the current system more efficient, and B, how we can attract more applicants or candidates, because inherently that's what what the conundrum is here, right? How do we increase the pool of applicants and the quality of applicants and the service that the court reporters provide, and make it as efficient and still keep the standards that we're accustomed to. So the crux of this should just be, you know, always looking at it from that lens. So I agree with everyone's sentiments here.
I would piggyback on that comment and say that court reporters have always been fabulous at grassroots efforts. I think we've all been taught that. Certainly, whenever we get involved with board leadership and in the professional associations, and just like that, I'll say CCRA and DRA both have, and LACRA, the LA Superior Court Reporters Association, and other associations as well. They have been and continue to make efforts at recruiting and getting the word out about the VoiceWriter licensure, getting the word out about schools. It behooves all the licensees to get more court reporters in the state. Now, I don't know if that's something that we mention in the Sunset Review because we're not actually doing that, but that is going on in the industry. There is an active effort on behalf of the associations and those all associations representing court reporters to recruit and to recruit students into the profession.
Could we, is there a coordinated effort among the associations and maybe some feedback or report they can give us on their efforts? Because if there's a way that we can help provide some guidance and resources and unite their efforts, and maybe I just recall, in college and community colleges, I know there are a lot of organizations recruiting and teaching students about new careers. So if we can really help provide them the resources and the intellectual resources, right, the materials, and the opportunities to recruit candidates, I think that's something that we should do. We individually as a board, I don't know if we have the bandwidth, and we're not, like you said, we're not on the grassroots locally to do that recruitment, but the associations are, and they're in tune with what's going on. So I think that's something we should try to look into doing.
I can tell you that as far as the two state associations, they do communicate and they do coordinate efforts, I would say. I don't know if I would go so far as to say coordinate efforts. That's my guess, but I don't know that for a fact. They absolutely communicate. And I would say they work together. And some of the more local associations, for instance, LA, I know that they've got common representatives from the state association, as well as LACRA is very involved on the state level as well. So I can tell you that they do coordinate. For
example, I like job fairs, college job fairs. I mean, that's a great place to recruit.
Absolutely. We reporters, that's the type of thing that's what I was meaning, or part of what I was meaning about court reporters. From early in our careers, we're asked to go to job fairs, go talk to classrooms. This is the profession, the best profession you've never heard of. And most people have never even heard of court reporting until that one person comes along and then they learn about it from them. And so that's part of the grassroots efforts that I think many of us have done. Certainly anybody in a leadership role has done that. Can it be improved on? Absolutely. I'm not saying don't include it, but just so you know, just as part of the background.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, reporters are really good at that. And I know that Ms. Benner has represented the board and the profession didn't we just discuss this recently, that you've participated in some job fairs and counselors, high school counselors?
Yeah, so I'm often asked to go to local career fairs There are a couple of high schools in the area that have, they call them either law academies or legal academies, and they incorporate all of the different fields that touch on the legal system. And they'll do mini job fairs where it's only things that are related to law enforcement or the legal field. And I've been participated at a number of those, and it's really exciting to see the high school students who may not have had any contact in an actual courtroom, so they really don't know that court reporters exist and what we do. So it's always a rewarding way to spend a day. I'll just put it that way.
As long as we're on this topic, I would ask how Mr. Manayan raised the issue about the board offering resources, and I don't know what that would look like. If that's something that we would, I guess that's more of a question I put out there to those who have been here longer. And is that something that we would do or could do, or does that fall under our umbrella?
So we do have a student career brochure. There's no question it probably could be updated. And I don't know that paper is the way for any message to get across. So maybe we can reach out to the Public Affairs Office of DCA. They've been super supportive and helpful of us when we ask for help with our social media messages. So that may be a place that we can add support.
And exactly, and we'll take their. I know that the state does a great job of, just outreach, community affairs, communications, and social media. So if we can tap into the existing resources that we have in the DCA, I'm sure there's a lot of bright people who know much more about outreach and marketing than we do. So I think we should tap into and ask them for guidance. Whether it's just creating digital, maybe some refreshed digital materials that we can send to the associations to share, to colleges, reach out to college career coordinators, maybe, at least in the UC and the community college systems. They're part of the California, right, the state of California family at the end of the day. So I'm sure we can, at a high level, distribute that information, let them know about the opportunities, and have them share it with their respective members and students. Something simple doesn't need to be too complicated. It's just something very simple, to the point, and that'll get someone's attention.
Thank you.
I'm happy to work on those efforts too, whatever we need to do. So,
Great.
Thank you.
I wanted to mention that I was thinking we'd go until 3:00, if that works for everybody. Hopefully that works for everybody. And Ms. Hurt had her hand up, and Ms. Brewer next, please, after that.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the question, of someone who's been on the board for a while. Everything that's kind of been stated, we've gone through. I think one of the really difficult parts is when we talk about resources for others, it's almost like resource for ourselves. In other words, staff time is already pretty much taken up. And so some of these tasks, I think, in maybe our private sector world can get done a little bit easier than it is able to get done in this space. But it's all great suggestions. I would also say the board in the past was in a different financial setting. And so when I spoke earlier about really tightening our belt and trying to make sure that we could still fund the TRF, that we could still do the mission critical issues, we were able to continue working in that way. But trying to lend resources to the shortage, I think sounds great. It's just we're going to need to figure out where that money comes from, which goes back to my conversation about long-term fiscal solvency. And what are the things we can do in the short term versus the things we need to do in the long term. So I appreciate the discussion here. And I think we're going to have to think about with our pennies how we really make them stretch and go long and far. But all things we've talked about for years. But I think now the board's in a space where we can have a conversation that puts money towards these issues. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ms. Brewer?
Thank you. Those are all really good points, and it's really good to hear from Ms. Hurt about the historical efforts and coming up against the staff and financial issues. With the other state program that I'm not a board member, but I provide services for, where I've seen them get incredible results with marketing is with Facebook, YouTube, and PSAs. Now, you're talking about real money and real staff time when you get into that stuff. But I'm wondering if we couldn't be supportive or encouraging of the associations trying to take that on. I mean, even NCRA, they've got a vested interest, you know, I mean, their membership has plummeted. So, and I'll tell you, the results are impressive. Now, I don't know how well we could target our audience, but I'm sure there are ways to do it. So I just throw that out there for consideration.
Actually, I was just going to, the mention of the Facebook and the online media presence, I'm sure is going to be listed under current issues, or maybe not current issues, but what have we done? We need to, because I think it's important that we highlight that in the report.
Got it.
And I interrupted you, Ms. Fenner.
I was just going to say I've been madly taking notes, so it's not that I'm not participating, but I am making notes for the draft report. If we have time, I think that the last new issue from the last report, we had identified licensees not staying current on legislative changes. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think that one's an easy one to address. I'll put it that way. Chair Sunkis and I have spoken at numerous conferences. Our enforcement analyst, Ms. Conkle, and I have done some online seminars. We've put out newsletters. We've switched over to social media. I think that, you know, we've done a lot in getting information out on legislative changes. So I think I can address that just with, you know, going through board minutes and our previous publications.
Thank you. I was going to add something, actually separate from this, the legislative changes. I was reading for AB 5. Was that part of this sunset review, or because I think it was about that time? Possibly. I don't know. I am so sorry. I started talking and then distracted myself, and I don't know where I was heading. It's getting a little late. Sorry.
So is 5 independent contractors? Remind me.
Pardon me? You
were saying AB 5?
Oh, AB 5. I wondered if perhaps that was part of this, because I see as the IRS took closer looks for CRB issue number 4, when you were talking about legislative changes. That was a topic at that time, and I saw the IRS. Yes. Are you trying to jog my memory, Ms. Fenner?
I'm just trying. I never remember the bill numbers. So when you were saying AB5, I'm like, that rings a bell. Is that the one about independent contracting? So yes.
Thank you. It was, but my brain moved on to something else in the meantime, and that's where I wanted to go, and I don't remember where it was. But luckily, Miss Brewer has her hand raised. So I'll call on you.
Sorry for being a mic hog. So one other issue, I just looked at one of my little Post-its here. I don't know where we could do this and if this is even an appropriate time to bring it up, but getting a requirement for licensees to give us their email. And then wouldn't it be so much easier to just send out email blasts when the board does significant things?
Great idea.
They can't say they didn't hear if we send it right to their email box.
True. Ms. Finner, is there a place in this sunset review to discuss the efforts the board made to when in COVID we pivoted to the courts, the users, consumers pivoted to remote proceedings, and the board addressed that, very quickly appointed a task force to develop best practices for reporters?
Yes, I'll make sure. There definitely is an area where they want us to share any publications or anything like that that we've done.
Okay. Just to highlight,
yes.
I think that was important.
So what I would propose, it feels like we're stalling a little bit. So what I would propose is let me take all of this information and let me do a draft. And it'll be a rough draft because once we see the issues before us, we'll probably want to flesh them out more, or maybe you don't agree with the way I've characterized them. There will be no pride of authorship. You can completely rewrite any of it, but I know for myself, it's easier to edit something that I'm looking at. The tough part about that is it's hard to read for omissions. It's a lot easier to read what's there and correct that. But if I've forgotten anything, I would encourage you all to keep notes. Laura's famous Post-it notes, have them available. You can send me notes ahead of time, but really this will come before you. So it's no big deal to just hold on to them. So when this reappears before you, we can draw all of those thoughts into this report.
Okay. Agreed. Thank you.
I want to thank the board for your hard work on this. I mean, it's not easy thinking about big issues. It's not easy being retrospective about what we've done. So I appreciate all of the input, and clearly you guys have been thinking about it in order to give me all of these ideas.
I will say that I think it will be helpful going into strategic planning and then further discussions on sunset review after that. So it works both ways. I think it'll be helpful having this discussion, strategic planning discussion. I think that will help further sunset review process.
I think it worked out well because we'll get the retrospective done. We've kind of touched on some of the things that I'm sure we'll circle back around on strategic planning, and then we'll be able to finish off the report after that. So good job.
Great. Thank you, everyone. It's been a little longer day than we've had in the past. So thank you all. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.
Miss Sunkis?
Yes, Miss Bruni?
Do you need to call for public comment on this item?
Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it does look like we have a request from individual identified as Carolyn Dasher. Carolyn, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Hi, this is Carolyn Dasher. Thank you all for letting me make a comment. And I really appreciate all of your commitment and looking into these issues. A couple things I did want to bring up. One is Mr. Mananian. Any input that the board would have for the associations or those of us out here working on these issues is happily appreciated. And I don't know how we can get that kind of information, but we are working on a lot of the issues that you all spoke about. So getting help from the state would be really welcomed. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, and if it's not the appropriate time for me to bring this up, then let me know because I jumped on late today. But I don't know if the issue was discussed of allowing test takers to take the skills exam more than once in the monthly window. That's just an idea, and perhaps it can be on the next agenda if today's not appropriate. And Ms. Brewer did talk about the coordinating with the courts. And one thing that I think somebody has to coordinate with the courts is if we did require official reporters in certain types of proceedings, it would open up more of the freelancers to perhaps take official positions. And that's my opinion, not anybody else's. And currently, CCRA and LACRA are working on voice writing webinars, and they have those once a month. And I would like to see that increased just to get the general public information on the voice writing aspect of the career. And those are flyers and information that we have been passing on to legislators as we go to meetings with them so they can post them on their newsletters, websites to help their constituents to get a new job in a field where they can make decent money. I guess that was all I had to say, but any input would be wonderful. And we are feverishly working on all these issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dasher.
This is the moderator. Our next individual who has requested public comment is Priscilla Gwaltney. And Priscilla, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
For the opportunity to speak today and for everything you're doing. Really appreciate it. And then I do have Ms. Fenner's email, but I'm wondering how I can get in touch with Mr. Arteen Manayan. I would like to have a conversation about what he mentioned today. I'm done. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
All right. This is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
So I would just let Ms. Gwaltney know that we really, the public doesn't really contact the board members directly, but you can work through me if you've got questions, and I can pass information on to Mr. Manayan. But the best contact, I would be your best contact point.
Thank you. Anything else from our board members? Okay, then I will adjourn the meeting. Look, it's 3 o'clock on the nose.
Thank you all.
Thank you.